What's going on, YouTube? Thank you for tuning in to another episode of Welcome to Texas Podcast. So, I want to start off by telling everybody that's been subscribing, dropping comments, liking the comments on the videos. Thank you so much. It's, it's I really appreciate it. It helps the channel grow. Uh, I got some topics that I wanted to talk about. I'll probably do it live and on one of the topics here in a little bit. Uh, but I ran across this video a couple of days ago, and there was a kind of sad, tragic story of what this young, a kid went through. Especially here in Texas. That you would get sentenced for such a crime like that to even go to prison. A simple what I've seen people do on YouTube. It's nowhere near what this kid did. I think he set a garbage or a dumpster on fire, and basically a little simple, a kid being kid, man. I know I can remember getting kicked out of some apartment complex because I did something similar with my older brother. Uh, at the time, we were living in Carrollton, and it was an area that wasn't really developed at the time, so there was a lot of fields. And during the summer, those fields would get dried, and the the manager's son of the apartment complex, he would be driving a four-wheeler around that area. So me and my brother, we had that idea of making some Molotov cocktails. And the sad part about it is that the son of the manager gave us the gas out of his tank for us to do it. He was there with us, so that's how they knew that it was us. We got kicked out the apartment complex because short story short, we made some Molotov cocktails, and we burned that whole field down. Luckily, the same thing. We luckily that it didn't go into the residential areas and catch somebody's house on fire or even the apartment complex on fire. After everything was said and done, it was just black charred. Where it kind of died out. It didn't go any further, but you could tell that something could have bad gone if it would have been a bigger fire. So I understand, but at the same time, it doesn't add up for this guy. He received the 8-year sentence, you know, and they sent him to one of I guess you could say, the worst prison for the juveniles. That's where all the young prisoners with heavy time would go, the Clemens unit. And at the same time, when he got sentenced, it was in '96. And I think at that time they had barely opened up that program called Courage in Clemens. But I'll look into that a little bit more. We're gonna pull up his father's notes that he wrote from jail, and it's just a sad, tragic story.
Here you got people beating up people for their tennis shoes. You got people just sodomizing people, just going rambunctious.
Someone comes in and is kind of scared or hesitant and stuff like that, shy, he's gonna get turned out. The chances are real high, that you're gonna get turned out. You're gonna get turned out. And they rape him, go in there and rape him, and guys sometimes, commit suicide because of that.
To all my family that I ever knew, I can't live life being mistreated, lied, and stolen from, and most of all being hurt. I most of all mean being behind bars when I say being hurt.
We had about a 2-minute long conversation, and he was crying on the phone. And he said, "Mom, I'm emotionally and mentally destroyed." That's the last time I really ever heard his voice.
The physical exam in the records did document that there were tears in the anus at certain times. They usually call it at 10 o'clock or 2 o'clock, given as a diagram of a clock. Even though it was documented, it was just covered over as if it never happened.
I have found forgiveness for those who have hurt me in my life, which has been a very short one, only 17 years.
Well, Rodney, he was a really small stature person. He probably didn't weigh 105 pounds at the most. I'll never forget his face. in his eyes. He had the sweetest face, and he smiled. I remember he smiled a lot. Unfortunately, in the prison, there's a hierarchy or a pecking order. There are those that they call the haves and the have-nots. Rodney would be considered a have-not.
I'm very sorry to end my life this way, but if I don't do this, someone will. I'm saying I'd rather die of my own free will than be killed. That's why I must do this.
If I remember correctly, this trash can, we have taught it was.
Yeah,
It might have been right there, but I think it's been moved.
it
I
has
think it was a little closer up. I mean, we had flames come out of the trash can that I would say at least 10, 15 feet high from different chemicals poured in and it's lighting it. You know, it barely even burnt it. Matter of minutes, they had it out. But it's the fact of what little things you can do that can still have you put to prison. You know, misdemeanor arson, where did it get us? You know, it was funny the time being, but where did it get him today? I mean, it's just hard to sit here and look at this and realize this is probably one of the last spots I actually seen him at was in that yard.
A kid like that shouldn't have been in prison, but because of the judicial system, is sending a lot of young, troubled kids to the joint because they don't know what else to do with it. The classification system, if it had been running appropriately, should have kept him out of a cell or out of an environment where a guy was sodomizing him.
I think he was desperate, and unfortunately, in this case, there were people in this department I was in that were less than professional, to say the least. The psychologist said, he's just another fucking inmate. And I rebuttal. I said, but he's being raped and they're beating him. And he said, he probably likes it.
Frankly, in my own experience, it has almost never happened that we came up and verified that the offense did take place, or if the offense, or if there was some sexual activity, there wasn't some consensual agreement involved. Now, I'm not saying that rape doesn't take place in the penitentiary, because it does.
You know, you can see this pattern in some of the investigations that express this disbelief that a guy who did not want to have anal sex could be the victim of a rape. You know, that somehow, if it happened, it was because the guy wanted it.
State grievance 12/21/95. I have been sexually and physically assaulted several times by several inmates. I'm afraid to go to sleep, to shower, and just about everything else. I'm afraid that when I'm doing these things, I may die in any minute. Please, sir, help me.
You were seen by the Unit Classification Committee on December 18th, 1995, and your request for protection was denied unanimously. Unless you have new information to support your case for protection, your grievance is denied.
11396. I fear that my life is in danger. I've been threatened, jumped, and nearly stabbed many of times. I request to be placed on protective custody.
You have been reviewed twice by the Unit Classification Committee. Both times your request for protection was denied. Unless you have information to present, your request is still denied.
I called the warden. They asked the warden what was going on. What was he doing about it? And he wasn't doing nothing. He told me, he even told Rodney, learn to grow up. You're just a little boy. Learn to grow up. This happens every day. Learn how to deal with it. It's no big deal. And I've been told that so many times.
Even when I would ask him, I said, I'm trying really, really hard to get you some help. Can you hang on? He'd say, I'll try. I'll try real hard.
P.S. I love you all. I wish I could be with you all. Spiritually, I am. Signed, Rodney Hulin. I love you, Mom and Dad.
That's a sad story, you know. You see what the kid had to go through just for setting a trash can dumpster on fire, which it was put out in a matter of seconds. That's what the brother said that was there. And this guy went through all that just for that. That's real sad, you know what I mean? This letter right here is from his dad. It says, "Good morning. My name is Rodney Hulin, and I work at a retirement home in Beaumont, Texas. I am here today because of my son. He would be here himself if he could, and he would have spoken out against the plan by Congress to have juvenile offenders in adult prisons. But he can't because he passed away in one of those prisons. In 1995, my son Rodney Jr. was charged with arson when he was 16 years old. Luckily, no one was hurt in the fire. Of course, that doesn't excuse the fact that what my son did was foolish. After admitting his involvement in the offense, my son was sentenced to 8 years in an adult prison. I mean, 8 years at 16 years old for basically what YouTube dudes do be doing on pranks. 8 years, and not they sent him to Clemens. If anybody knows these Texas prisons, they know that's a gladiator farm for all these young dudes. But a lot of these young dudes already got heavy sentences. They got 25s, 45s, 85s, life sentences. They're there for a reason. It's not meant for kids like this, 16 years old. You know what I mean? At 16 years old, I was already I was already knee deep in the streets. I was already doing not no 16-year-old stuff. What he was doing, I was doing it when I was 8, 9 years old. Catching stuff on fire, burning stuff down. You know, it says Rodney spent his first year in prison in Abilene, Texas, without any problems. He could have probably been at that transfer facility in Middleton, because that's where everybody that's in that region decides to go. Not decides, but that's where they send them. Because that's where I went to from Dallas County. I went to Middleton, and that was in Abilene. He had a clean record and was hopeful he would be recommended for parole in a few years. Then, without any notice, he was transferred to the Clemens unit in Brazoria County on November 13th, 1995. Almost immediately, the problems began. Less than a week after the transfer, Rodney wrote to me from his new unit. It was obvious that his situation had to take a turn for the worse. Let me read a quick excerpt from the letter. Sorry about that. Dad, I am really scared. Scared that I will pass away in here. Please pray for me. Pray that I will get my job changed, sent to a hospital, get out of here alive, and that will get out on parole. I I want to live with you when I get out, if I make it out alive. My son was a fighter, so I knew he wasn't just letting prison life get to him. The new prison was different. The inmates were tougher, the guards had less control, and didn't seem to care what happened to Rodney, who was 17 years old at the time. 2 days after he sent me that letter, my son was raped and assaulted by another inmate. The doctor found 2 tears in his rectum and ordered an HIV test. Since up to a third of the 2,200 inmates were HIV positive, fearing for his safety, he requested to be placed in protective custody. But his request was denied because, as the warden put it, Rodney's abuse didn't meet the emergency grievance criteria. Well, I don't know what emergency. If he had tears in his rectum, apparently something happened to him, that he didn't want. And for the warden to just dismiss that as not meeting the emergency requirements or grievance criteria, no wonder they lost the settlement and they paid out. But I'll bring that up here at the end, towards the end of the video. And these are the times, before the prison gangs here in Texas ran wild. They were doing whatever they wanted to do without any kind of consequences from the administration and as far as the population, until a certain uh you can call it a protective organization rose and started changing the culture of the Texas prisons. But that's for another video. For the next several on the ni- for the next several months, my son was repeatedly beaten by the older inmates, forced to perform oral sex, robbed, and beaten again. Each time his requests for protection were denied by the warden. The abuse, meanwhile, continued. On the night of January 26, 1996, 75 days after my son entered Clemens' unit, Ronnie attempted to part this world. He could no longer stand to live in a continual terror. It was too much for him to handle. He laid in a coma for the next 4 months until he passed away. The night of the incident, my son had written about being tired of prison life and tired of living. The letter had been passed on to a prison guard by a friend of my son, who told the guard that Ronnie needed immediate attention. The guard shrugged it off and any concerned and walked in the opposite direction. That's what they do, man. They're just there to clock in and go home. Sometime during the next 15 minutes before the guard made his rounds to my son's cell, my son decided he had enough and acted on his depression. Unlike the prison guard, Congress could have not done anything to save my son, but Congress does have the power to prevent my son's tragedy from happening to others. Sending young children to adult prisons will not make our streets any safer. Sending children to be beaten, raped, and robbed does not deter crime. I did not give up on my son then, and I don't believe Congress should give up on our nation's children now. Children who commit crimes need to be rehabilitated and shown consideration and care. They do not deserve to be crucified for political gain. If there is any lesson to be learned by my son's death, is that children must not be locked up with adult criminals. That itself is a very sad situation, because the parents were aware, the administration was aware, and still nobody helped the kid out. I call him a kid because he's a kid. He was 16 years old when he committed this crime, 17 when he ended up in prison. You can look at him and you can see he's not built for that type of prison, or in the prison environment. In that time in the early 90s, like I said before, the prison gangs in Texas were running rampant. They were doing whatever they were doing, and they was part of it. Nobody was checking this type of stuff. It was being allowed. The administration knew. So in 1999, Texas settles with prisoner's family. The state of Texas agreed in June 1999 to pay 215,000 to settle a lawsuit filed by the family of Rodney Hulin, a 17-year-old Texas state prisoner who was found in his cell unalived in 1996. About 30 days after arriving at the Clemens units in Brazoria, Texas, Hulin told guards that he had been raped. I'm not going to read that because it's the same thing that it was about the other video, but it was just the point that his family was able to file a lawsuit, and still, man, $215,000. That's still not. I wouldn't put that a value on anybody's life. That's just money. It's not worth nobody's life at the end of the day. It's a sad situation what Rodney Hulin went through, and he's not the only one that went through. At that time there was plenty of others going through those same situations. Regardless of what your race was, even if you were black, white, Mexican, purple, green, it really didn't matter. The gangs had a strong hold on the prison culture, and that was part of it. It was either that fight fuck or the bus 60 mentality, you know, and a lot of people lost their lives during that era, you know. A lot of people got abused, you know, but that was the culture of Texas prisons in the 70s, 80s, 90s, you know. It was even worse than when the building tenders were in effect, you know, the self-governed inmates that controlled the prisons at one time. I have Robert Delgado. He's been locked up since I think the 80s, you know, 78 or 80. So you do the math, he's been there, you know, a pretty amount of time. And he was there when the building tenders were in place, and he's still there in effect when he's seeing this big old Christian movement being taken place in the Texas prisons. Hopefully y'all like this video. Uh, I plan to do more videos of see what's out there. I guess you could say this is a reaction video. Uh, Tonight I'll probably do a live talking about the cartels and the Venezuelans, Trin de Agua going at it. You know, the outcome on that. See what people feel about there, because you know, I know at one time they were coming here and people they were all hyped up that they were in Colorado and the Hells Angels were going to pull up to Colorado and straighten them boys out, and nothing ever took place. Uh, but we'll talk about that topic on the live tonight. You know, y'all, thank y'all so much, and hope y'all enjoyed this short video.